All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. My name is Vlad Katkov. I'm a solution architect here at Dundas, and today we'll be discussing the 5 ways Dundas BI surpasses the boundaries of typical visual data analytics tools. So just to let everyone know, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available after. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the GoToWebinar questions panel. We'll try to address some of them during the webinar, but I'll take what I can after as well. So the agenda for today, first we're going to discuss the merits of evaluating BI and analytics software using a bake-off style exercise. Then I'll give a brief introduction to Dundas as a company and Dundas BI. Then we're going to talk about the 5 ways Dundas BI surpasses other modern tools that are out there. This includes their enhanced user experience, richer visualizations, advanced data prep, better online and offline delivery, and lastly, turning consumers into producers. We'll then do a quick summary and open up the floor to Q&A. All right, so let's begin. First, what is a bake-off? This is a head-to-head comparison which is designed to help buyers evaluate different tools by pitting them against one another using a list of predefined criteria and a supplied data set. Now, this should really set the stage to have a true apples-to-apples comparison. This bake-off style is a preferred approach recommended by Gartner as well as Dundas because it does create a level playing field. It makes it significantly more difficult for perhaps one particular vendor to hide behind any industry and marketing buzzwords. Now, one method of successfully staging a bake-off involves using a scripted demo. In general, there are several steps you can take to get the most out of your scripted demos, and this section does borrow quite a bit from Gartner literature. So first, ensure there's a focus placed on topics that are actual requirements for the project. For instance, if your visualization tool can make coffee for you in the morning, that's very cool, but is it important for the project? To help with this, you can consider creating a weighted matrix to help score all the different players. Now, the next topic is beta software. It's a bit of a gray area. Simply make sure you understand what is being demonstrated during the scripted demo. How customized is the solution? Are all the interactions available out of the box? Was there a lot of scripting involved? If it is beta software, ensure that the timelines of its release sync up with your project. The next point is inviting a broader user base to the demo. So having more of your potential end users view the platform, this is always beneficial. It creates more feedback, and more feedback lends itself very nicely to more discussions. There's always going to be mixed feelings about having more opinions, but with more opinions, this can potentially cause a change in the project requirements. And if that's the case, it's always better to figure that out early on in the process than, let's say, right before you're making the purchase decision. Lastly, strongly do consider providing all the different vendors with some sample data. This can be your actual data. Perhaps it's a subset that has been sanitized. This helps add context to the presentation, makes the data more relatable to your audience. Now, I'll end this section with a quote I heard during the bake-off session. I thought it was really relevant. The reason for conducting this bake-off exercise is not about finding the best tool that's out there. It's about finding the tool which is the best fit. Every company, even every project within every company, will have different requirements. And when a vendor asks for your requirements and when you share them with the vendor, it's for a common goal to find a solution that's a good fit. Now, I know not everyone is comfortable with sharing their requirements, but we at Dundas have found there's a significantly higher success rate with our clients when we understand their goals and needs. So that's about the bake-off. Now, a little bit about the company. Next month, actually in April, Dundas is celebrating 25 years of creating innovative products in the data visualization and BI space. You can see that our product line has evolved substantially over the years, but the motto on the right side of the screen continues to be make 80% of use cases easy and all the rest possible. This is very evident in Dundas BI, where a lot of common use cases are available out of the box, yet our fully open APIs can be leveraged to extend and customize the end user experience. So this is our first look at really what is Dundas BI. This is a modern BI platform. It's entirely web-based, built on HTML5 and targets different users' needs and skill sets within an organization. So as you can see at the very top, we have 3 different user types, and the application was created with them in mind. And in terms of a holistic approach, this is a bit different from some competitors, and one of our biggest differentiators. We don't shy away from the fact that in an enterprise deployment, you will need different end users, and those end users will need to be exposed to various parts of the application. For example, you might have an analyst, someone that wants to just go ahead and quickly analyze an Excel file that they can bring into the system. On the other hand, you might have a BI professional or IT person, someone that can establish a connection to your database, create models, and then build reports and dashboards on top of those. Dundas BI truly is an end-to-end BI platform with rich functionality for all different user types that you'll have. Because everything is web-based, the experience is consistent across the different operating systems as well as different devices. Our administration layer is easily accessible through the browser, and this allows for complete control of users, security settings, configuration, things that are in fact quite crucial for the maintenance of an enterprise deployment, but sometimes overlooked when evaluating software simply due to the fact that it's not always as easy to demonstrate administrative tasks when you have nice dashboards to show off instead. Lastly, to highlight the flexibility of the platform, if you'll take a look at the bottom, we do have fully open APIs on the front end, back end, and in the cases where you'll be integrating and embedding Dundas BI. So here's the last slide before we jump into the demonstration. The advantage of Dundas BI is that it combines the best of both traditional IT-led applications, which were designed for enterprise-level deployments, with modern data discovery tools that are designed with a greater focus on ease of use. So our single platform provides the ability to run complex preparation processes as well as perform quick data discovery, and then to share those findings via scheduled, alert-based, or burst reporting. Dundas BI is fairly unique in offering these immense flexibility and so many capabilities that in many cases do require multiple tools. So with that introduction out of the way, let's start with the demonstration, and we'll first discuss about the enhanced user experience using layers. So give me just one quick second. I'm going to switch my screen. And now we are looking at a dashboard sample. So just before I dive into this, a quick overview of what we're looking at. This is a sample that was, in fact, created for Gartner's 2017 bake-off exercise, where, as we discussed, they invited different vendors, gave them a script, supplied sample data, and presented several challenges to create different visualizations and put them all out together on a dashboard. Now, this sample was created to answer the business question, which you can see in the top right of the screen. What is the leading cause of traffic fatalities? Is it different by age or state? This is, in fact, actual data that was supplied by the government. So when discussing layers, first we're going to, what are layers? They are a convenient way to make good use of screen real estate while also adding interactivity to a dashboard. What's nice about layers is it allows the end user to remain within the same context of the dashboard, which is powerful because it cuts down on the amount of navigation and general back and forth movement someone needs to do. So on our sample dashboard, we have leveraged layers in 2 different ways. The first was to give the end user the ability to choose how they would like to view the information. So one example of that is between these 2 maps that I have over here is a radio button. And this radio button allows me to switch the view. So right now we are seeing 2 separate maps. The one on the left indicates, the number of accidents by states in 2015, and the one on the right narrows that down and focuses solely on number of accidents that were caused by distractions. Now when I click on this overlay radio button, we see now a single map. And I can do this again just to illustrate that difference. And on this map, we have the symbols placed on top of each state. So the larger the symbol, the more distractions that were caused, and the darker the color, the more accidents overall. So this lets us interpret the data in a slightly different way. I'll speak more to that in just a moment. Now, in terms of this interaction, we've also added something very similar to this crosstab down here in the bottom. Right now, I'm viewing my data, viewing the absolute values of the information. However, I can switch that to a normalized view, which sort of removes the change in population between the different years from the equation. So that's the first use of layers, letting the user choose how they want to view the data. And just keep in mind, this isn't simply revisualizing the information. It's not the same as going from a line chart to a bar chart. We are providing some different context that's available here for the users. Now, the second use of layers on this dashboard is present in the form of a help overlay. So imagine this is the first time you are seeing this dashboard, and I'm sure for many of you that is the case. Now, there might be some questions about the visualizations or some of the data that you're seeing. So without having to ask someone else, or perhaps go back to IT, a help icon in the bottom corner brings up this help overlay so I can get to my information right away. Now just notice that these window panes we're showing, they are semi-transparent. So what the user sees is not just the help text, but also the visualization behind it. This adds a lot more context to this, makes it easier to read. So let's in fact construct something very quickly. I'd like to demonstrate how easy it is to come up and use layers in Dundas BI. So I'll simply switch my tab over here to a view where I'm creating dashboards. I'll open up a dashboard for my layers demonstration. So also a quick introduction to this view. This is our dashboard designer. At the top, we have a toolbar where I can insert different visualizations, components, filters, and so on. And then on the right side of my screen, I have this Explore panel, which lists all the objects that I currently have access to. Now, also on the right side is a tab for layers. And I click on that, and I'll see that as of right now, I have a single layer, which I've called base. So layers, for those familiar with designing, layers are really ubiquitous in that world. Photo editing software, that's where layers come in. So it's quite interesting to see that in a business intelligence tool where you can in fact kind of blur that line between a designer and an analyst. So I'll start this now by creating a new layer. My first layer, I'm going to display a chart on it. So I'll name it chart, and believe me, naming them pays off in the end, a lot less confusion. And the second one will have a details view. So when I click on a layer, you'll see the blue bar indicates that it's active. Let's start adding some content to the dashboard. So from my Explore panel, just for the sake of time, I'll use these existing metrics that I've created. So I'll simply drag on a metric set, and then on this layer, I'll want the ability to switch to my other one. I'll accomplish that with a button. And in case you're wondering what are these black rectangles on the dashboard, this was created with the use of a template. I've only done this to help with sizing the visualizations out on the screen. I can still resize everything as much as I want, but for simplicity's sake, this makes it a bit easier. So on this button, I will type in details view. And maybe just one thing I'll do from the properties panel, make it a little bit more readable, assign a larger font size. So now this is one layer that I've set up, and perhaps it also makes sense to drop in a legend for this chart. And let's bring that up over there. Okay, so this will be my first layer with the chart. I'll go back to my layers panel, and now I'll simply hide this layer. So I'm making it invisible. The information, well, the visualizations are still there, however, the user can't see them. Now with my details layer active, I'll go back and I'll do that same exercise, drag this out, which is a table, also add in another button, and this will switch back to my chart view. So I'll call that chart view, and as we did before, change the font size. Okay, so now I have my two layers. The question is, I want to be able to switch these views when the user presses the button. So in Dundas BI, we can accomplish that without the use of any script. By clicking on the button, Chart View, on my menu bar, I'm able to set up interactions. And there are many different types of interactions available in Dundas BI out of the box that don't require any scripting. In my case, I want the change layer interaction. So when I click on this button, I want to hide my details layer, instead show the chart layer. Let's apply that. We'll switch my layer view like so. And on this button, this will have, this will display details, hide chart, display details. And so now we're pretty much good to go. I can very quickly view my dashboard. This means everything I'm seeing is now interactive. I can, for instance, click on details view. You'll notice it changes my chart to the chart, and I can switch back. And that's really all there is to adding layers. Once again, this was a fairly simple example. As you saw, this can be leveraged to create things like help overlays, more advanced interactions as well, without having to resort to any type of scripting at all. Okay, so the next topic we're discussing is richer visualizations that allow new insight discovery. So to talk about this one, I'm in fact going to go back to my dashboard sample that we had before. And let's direct our focus back to this overlay map. So this combined view makes it much easier to find any outliers and anomalies that we have in the data. So for example, we can take a look and if you see Washington State, it has a fairly large orange circle, which indicates there were lots of distractions, but the overall number of accidents is not all that high. So in fact, this lets us know that there's a large proportion of distracted accidents in the state. If I switch back to my side-by-side view, it's much more difficult, if in fact almost impossible, to draw the same type of conclusion. Now on this map, we've also added a filter interaction. So let's say I'm interested in one particular state, such as Montana. I can click on it and you'll notice that all the visualizations on my screen revisualize. They're filtered by this particular state. Now on the right side of the screen, we have a very interesting visualization. This is called a relationship diagram, which, as the name implies, indicates how my different values are related to one another. Now I'll talk about this visualization in just 1 second, but before doing that, let's go ahead and make some changes to this dashboard in order to try and gain new insights in a little bit of a different way. So from my menu at the top, I'll simply hit Edit, and this takes you once again back to that very same dashboard designer that you saw before. I'll just scroll over to the right, take a look at this visualization. Now on these visuals, I can right-click, and when I right-click, I get this Dundas BI context menu that appears. One of the options in the context menu is Revisualize. This is a pretty powerful feature, also available to end users of the platform. You don't necessarily have to edit the dashboard to revisualize. And by clicking on that, I'm able to select different style visualization to view the data. You can see there are many visualizations that ship with the product. Gauges, maps, custom diagrams are allowed, formula visualizations, and a whole lot of others to choose from. Now, data like this, just to mention at the very top, we are also showing recommended visualizations to help the user kind of best choose how they can view the data. So a simple, somewhat obvious way of displaying this information is in a bar chart. So I can click on that, and this changes the way the data is displayed. Now, why this is a little bit difficult for me to use is I've lost that relationship between the total number of accidents that were caused when the driver was drunk and sober. So to kind of bring that context back, I can go into the Properties panel, and there is an option that will display total values on the chart. So now you can see we have three rectangles showing up. The first one on the right indicates the total number of sober accidents, and the one second to the right indicates the number of drunk accidents, and then we're adding all those values together. So with this type of view, I'm now able to more closely see the relationship between how many drunk and sober accidents were caused. And what makes Montana stand out is that the ratio is almost a 1-to-1 ratio, number of accidents that were caused. So you can see that I had to, first of all, do a little bit of work to get to this information, and even still, viewing this information in a bar chart might not be the best way to do it. So using the undo menu, option in my menu, I'll simply go back to my relationship diagram. And once again, this is a very interesting type of visualization. Right off the bat, it's easy for me to see that the number of sober accidents is almost as much as the number of drunk accidents. And it's just viewing the data differently will sometimes help with your analysis. All right, so that's it for that section. The next thing we'll talk about is advanced data preparation without the use of a third-party tool. So I'll jump back into my other instance. I'll just simply navigate to the default home page over here. And let's start on this section. So before you can build a dashboard or begin working with your data, it is necessary to establish a connection to that data. So whether that implies you're using many different Excel files, some type of backend database and application, or perhaps even in an entirely custom web source that's built using APIs, the experience in Dundas BI doesn't really change. So the first thing that I can do is, as I mentioned, establish that connection to the data. Right here on the home screen, it's very simple. I click on Connect to Data. And this brings up my data connector panel. So if I use this drop-down list, you can see that there are many visualizations that ship with the, not visualizations, data connectors that ship with Dundas BI out of the box. And we are always working on extending this list. As well, just to let you know, using our open APIs, if there is a custom web source, perhaps you're trying to retrieve JSON data using REST or something similar, you can use our open APIs to connect to that. Now consider this following use case that, in fact, I see fairly frequently. An analyst might maintain their own repository of separate Excel files, and they might want to analyze all of them at once. Or perhaps you're using Excel files that are automatically generated by some application. They're all stored on a centralized server, and new ones are added nightly or weekly or so on. So with the Microsoft Excel connector, I can do one of two things. I can simply upload a file, and this creates kind of like a one-off of that file. I can start analyzing it. Alternatively, I do have access to this UNC path. This allows me to copy and paste or just type in a directory somewhere on my computer or on my network. Now you'll notice that this is my network folder, and then I've written sales orders with a star and the Excel extension. So this star tells Dundas BI that I'm interested in fetching all the files in my directory that begin with sales orders. So if I do have multiple files, Dundas BI will treat them as one right here in the data connector, and it will join those files together without the user even having to do anything. So once you establish the data connector, you can begin creating dashboards and reports and scorecards right away, but I will take a slightly more structured approach and jump to our advanced data preparation layer, which we refer to as our data cubes. So this is our data cube layer. Now many BI tools out there do advertise the fact that they have ETL functionality built in, but in some cases their functionality is limited to simple joins in calculations. Otherwise, if you want to do something more advanced, that does require knowledge of scripting. So our ETL layer is targeted towards two types of users, data analysts as well as DBAs or IT/developer folk. So let's build out something in this cube. I'll start by navigating to the right side of the screen. Once again, I have my Explore panel. I can open up my data connectors folder, and this shows me all the different data connectors that my current user has access to. Now I see, for instance, I can open up one of my databases. I'll see all my tables. In order to start using this information, it's simply a matter of dragging that out onto the screen. So now I've selected my first table. I can go ahead, grab another table, and very easily I can join two of them together. Now in this case, I said this was done very easily. Dundas BI automatically picked up on the relationships that existed that essentially came from the database itself. So for the technical people out there, primary, foreign keys, those types of relationships are picked up automatically during Dundas BI's data discovery phase when you establish the connector. Now let's make this perhaps a little bit more interesting. What I can do is I can in fact grab an Excel file that I have. So the scenario I'm displaying here is you have some data which is coming from your database. Perhaps an analyst creates a file they want to blend with that information. This is an Excel data. Once again, I attempt to join the two of those together. Now, Dundas BI does essentially its best effort at figuring out how should I join these two data sources together. It doesn't always work. In this case, you'll see the join showing up as red. So I simply double click and I can configure it manually. Now this is very easy for a user to play around with. For example, in my case, I'd like to join card type on this other card type column, and I can also specify the type of join that I'm looking to do. So without writing any SQL or any type of script, it's still possible for a user with limited knowledge of databases to create a join like so. Now what's very nice about the application is whenever I click on one of these transformations is what we call them, at the bottom of my screen I can in fact preview my data. This is now a live connection right to the data source. So this is querying the database and I can see all my different rows over here. Now if I do the same for my Excel file, this is the one that my analyst created. Now just pay a little bit close attention to the card type column. Here, for whatever reason, the analyst decided to capitalize everything and then restrict it to 5 characters. So whether they did this manually or it was exported that way, doesn't really matter. Going back to my credit card information, you'll see it's typed out a little bit differently. So right now, it's not very easy for me to join this information together. However, within the tool, I'm able to accomplish that. So let's begin. I'll click on this line that connects my two transformations, and then from the menu at the top, I can insert some different functions that we have. So as I mentioned in the beginning, you don't need to have any scripting or programming knowledge or expertise in order to use this. A lot of these functions are really made, as you can see here, they are human readable names, different string functions. I can make everything uppercase, and then I'll add in one more that just grabs the first 5 characters using the left function. And so now I can essentially step through my data. I can see this is what I'm starting with originally. I've now made everything uppercase, and now I've limited it to 5 characters. So now the data will in fact join properly. Now there are a lot of other functions, once again, things such as filters, math functions, more advanced joins in the form of a lookup. For the developers out there, we do also have a calculated element. This one is quite nice. It does allow you to type in some C# code and expression. So without getting too technical here, I can maybe do a very quick comparison on, let's say, my invoice amount, and I could say if something is greater than 5,000, let's return true. Otherwise, we'll return a false value. And this creates a new column in my data set. I'll just name it my column, apply this change, and I can see the live calculation that Dundas BI does. If I scroll all the way to the right, you'll see my column, some values are true and some are false. So what this allows me to do is perhaps use this value further down in the cube when I'm joining my data together. I can also use it to filter out values I'm not interested in. Or lastly, if you want, you can also give your users the ability right out on a dashboard, give them the filter. Would you like to see the values that are under 5,000 or over, or both? And they can make that determination. So just before moving on, the last thing so we discussed up to this point how an analyst a business analyst can use the cube, dragging and dropping without perhaps any script or code or a very limited amount. Now, if you are perhaps a DBA familiar with query language, you can, for starters, leverage any stored procedures or custom views that have been defined in your database. So Dundas BI can recognize those automatically, and you can bring them out here and start using them. As well, we also do have a manual select transformation. So if you do have queries that are optimized, you can simply copy paste them right into here and use them instead of building out this entire cube. And the last thing to mention is right here, this sort of inconspicuous button storage type, but it is very important. So if we take a quick step back and look at the data cube from a very high level, the idea is that I am joining different data sources together, I'm cleansing my data and perhaps making some transformations to it in order to prepare it for the business users to work with, whether it's out on a dashboard, whether they're performing their own analysis. Here I am making sure the data makes sense to those types of users. Now I can have as many data cubes as I like in the system. You're not limited to any amount. And then out on a dashboard, you can also build visualizations that come from different cubes. So once all the data is finalized, if you click on storage type, you're in fact able to specify how should the data be saved and accessed by Dundas BI. And we have 3 different storage methods. The first one is none. This means that data is not stored and in fact is retrieved on the fly for every user request. This will allow you to create those real-time dashboards. The second option we have is warehouse. This will take the resultant data and put it into Dundas BI's data warehouse, and this does some of the calculations ahead of time, so it can help with performance, especially if you are using, for instance, Excel as a data source. And the last option over here is in memory. Similar to the warehouse option, it's there for performance reasons. It's the most performant of all these 3 options as well. A lot of things such as aggregates, they are calculated when the data goes into memory, so the dashboards will be very quick and responsive. So that's it for the data preparation layer. Once again, everything is built right into the platform, and we have a lot of functionality that's available here. So I'll continue by now discussing better online and offline delivery. And so to do this, I'll actually jump back to the dashboard that we created with my layers. And as I did before, I'll begin the section with a quote. In the 1989 movie Field of Dreams, a magical voice tells Kevin Costner, "If you build it, they will come." Now, while this might work for Hollywood, dashboard and reporting systems perhaps are a little bit different. So ideally, you do want users to view their dashboards regularly, but life and work is bound to get in the way, so we do need some different ways of delivering content to the end users. As previously mentioned, Dundas BI is web-based, so interacting with the visuals does occur online. The software does have several forms of online collaboration, and I'll begin with notes, in other words, also known as annotations. So on a dashboard, a user with the appropriate privileges can right-click on any particular data point, and from the context menu, they can select Add Note. So when I click on this, this brings a little comment bar up at the top, and I can go ahead and say, for instance, why did this value drop? Apply that note, and now you'll see the comment is appearing on this visualization. I can hover over, and it'll in fact tell me that my user has added this note at this particular time. So this allows users to collaborate, right in this environment without having to leave the dashboard. Someone else can go ahead and use the menu. They can reply to that note, and we can have a discussion thread going about the data. Now, just to let you know, you can also set properties on notes. You can modify their security. Perhaps certain notes should only be available to a certain team or just the executives. And also, when you add a note, you do have the option up there to select if it will be publicly viewable or perhaps private, which will mean only my particular user can see it. So that's a nice way to sort of set some reminders for yourself out on a dashboard. So after the data has been analyzed in this way, it might need to be displayed, let's say, to a team in a presentation. And in Dundas BI, it is very easy to define a sequence of dashboards that, dashboards and reports that go in a cycle. We call this a slideshow. So I can go ahead and very quickly create a new slideshow. And the idea of a slideshow, it helps immensely with storytelling. This is quite a powerful feature as the views in a dashboard can still display live information. So I'll add the layers sample we put together as well as another dashboard, a sales summary that I created ahead of time. And now I can preview this information. So you'll see down at the bottom, I have these controls. It will automatically cycle, but this is this other dashboard that I put together. So during the presentation, this can cycle. I can always pause it, discuss this data in more details, and if I right-click, I'm also able to navigate right to that dashboard and interact with it, talk more about it, and so on. So let's, in fact, discuss this, this dashboard again. Dundas BI also has several different offline delivery methods. Now, as before, this can all be controlled with the necessary account privileges, but a user can click on Share in the menu option at the top and either generate a link that they can send over to other users or save this as a static export of the dashboard. You can see we support image, PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, and also CSV. Now it's also, each one of these does have their own options. So very quickly I can, for example, click on Excel. I can demonstrate where if I want to export the entire view, maybe I just want to export my single chart, which with all that's, this happens to be the only thing on this dashboard right now, but it is quite flexible, lets the user play around with some parameters. Now it's also possible to set up automatic exports of these dashboards. This is what we call notifications, and we have the notification option in the toolbar right here. 3 different types of notifications. I'll go over them very quickly. The scheduled one, as the name implies, you can, on a schedule of your choosing, automatically send this out to different users in your organization. Now when setting up a notification or exporting to a static file, that simply creates a file. What I mean by that is you can send that out to absolutely anybody in the organization. They don't necessarily need to have a Dundas BI license to view that data. The license is only required when you want to enter the application, play around with some of these interactions and the right-click context menu and so on. But if you're just setting up a report to be sent out, you can target any users that you'd like. So that's the schedule notification. Perhaps every Monday morning, Friday evening, whatever the case might be, send out the reports. The second notification we have is the note notification. So whenever someone leaves a comment, just like I did with my comment right here, why did this value drop, you can also automatically trigger an alert. And lastly, we have our data-driven notification. And this one is quite powerful. It allows you to monitor the certain data points. Without getting into the intricacies of it, not just monitor thresholds. I know there's a lot of tools out there that let you set a threshold and you can wait until your value hits that number. You can also monitor patterns in the data. So perhaps you're interested in seeing if my, let's say, sales have been decreasing for the past month, 4 weeks in a row. I'd like to alert somebody to that fact. So the data-driven notification is fairly powerful. And the last thing to discuss, I'll hop back to the scheduled one once again, but this is a new feature we're introducing for version 4 of the project, of the product. This is the right menu option. It is now possible to set up what's known as report bursting. So I'm able to set up my different recipients over here, but I can specify that every one of them should have their own version of the report. Now, how this makes sense, perhaps I'm creating a single dashboard which defines sales data for all my different regions, and now I want to distribute it to my different regional managers. Everyone should be able to see just their own data. So with report bursting, you can go ahead and specify user A sees the Northwest region, user B sees southeast, and so on. This can also occur programmatically using custom attributes that you associate with the user. So that's it for online and offline delivery. Now we're on to our last topic of discussion, turning consumers into producers. And so this is an interesting idea in general because what I described before is when you properly implement a governed self-service structure and in an enterprise solution, it is inherently necessary to restrict some functionality from the user. So I'll jump back to my screen over here. Now, when you have the technical users perhaps set up those different data cubes that I demonstrated, connect to all the sources and perform the necessary calculations, in the end of the day, it's the business users. They're going to be the ones that interact with the information and most likely know it better than anybody else. So perhaps they've used some data which they know is incorrect or might be simply missing. So this is a new feature I'm about to show off for Dundas BI version 4. It will give users the ability to right-click on a particular data point and from the menu select correct value. And then up here at the top, I could enter any value that I want. So for example, as you can see, the value I clicked on was for the last month of my data set. The sales were very low. Perhaps some data was missing. I could specify a different value and just apply that to the chart. Now you can see how it changed. The value appears over here. Notice there is a comment or note that gets automatically added. It tells the user, or rather the users, who made the change, what was the original value, when was the change made as well. And I'll just very quickly do the same with my the number of products that were sold. And so now we have data that looks a little bit more correct. So something to discuss is that these changes that I'm making are associated with this particular metric set. It doesn't get written back to your original data, so you don't have to worry about users coming in and modifying the actual data source. That is a separate part in the application. If you'd like to enable, right now this is simply for the business users to modify the view in order to allow them to continue working with the information. So any other user that is working off of this data, after I've made my change, they will see it. They'll now have the correct details. Now there are other ways in which Dundas BI empowers consumers. One of our new features is data input. Unfortunately, for the time being, this little teaser is all I can provide, as version 4 is currently in beta testing. But for those of you that are interested in features such as data input, contextual measures, form data collection, more advanced visualizations, federated authentication, and much more, I do invite you to join our next webinar, which is all about version 4. That's scheduled for Thursday, April 27th, so about a month from now, and we'll be sending out email communications about that. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and just do a quick summary. Everything that we've discussed up to this point, we first began by discussing, or rather evaluating using a bake-off exercise when looking at different tools. We discussed how this approach generally levels the playing field. I discussed the merits of providing vendors with information and data. Once again, it's for a common goal, not necessarily for some vendors to try and hide shortcomings in their application, but that might be a possibility, so just do watch out. And the takeaway was you're looking for the software that is the best fit for your organization, users, and project. And we discussed very quickly about Dundas BI, the fact that it's an end-to-end BI and analytics platform. Everything is entirely web-based and everything is centralized, so no more data silos. All the information can be controlled and governed from one area. Then we discussed the 5 ways Dundas BI surpasses other tools. This was with our user experience using layers in the application, richer visualizations for new insights, advanced data preparation, online and offline delivery, and lastly, turning consumers into producers. So with that out of the way, just before we open it up to the Q&A session, for those of you that liked what you saw, there are several next steps that you can do. First of all, we do have a free trial of the product, an online trial, which does not require you to install anything. This gives you that analyst experience where you can bring in your own Excel files and play around with them in the system. Alternatively, if you want the full experience, the ability to connect to your data sources, create data models, and so on, there's a full product download that you can install. Lastly, if you have any other questions, you want to perhaps see another walkthrough, you can also get in touch with us or perhaps with your account executive if you've already spoken to them and schedule a demonstration. So let's go ahead and open up the questions. I know some questions have already been answered thanks to my colleague Ariel, and there are several others. Let me take a look. So we do have one question about connecting to an AS400 database. That should be possible using an ODBC driver to do in the system. So I can quickly jump back into the product and show you from a data connector. One of our options here is ODBC. So we have seen our clients connect to, for instance, AS400, things such as DB2, legacy systems, but also newer big data sources such as Hadoop. Now, another question we had, how are you able to change layers on the dashboard without hiding all of those other visualizations out on the screen? Well, for starters, how you set up the layers is entirely up to you. So for instance, I'm viewing my data like this, but maybe I resize and, as an example, view my two layers side by side. So this is one way of using the system as well. The whole purpose of layers is to try and fit more onto the screen. Now, this does bring up a very interesting point that I want to mention right now about layers. In my particular case, I was displaying a line chart, which is more or less a summary of the data, and then also a detailed breakdown of the information. Now, this makes sense when I'm using layers. I can switch from my summary to my details view. However, you do have to be careful. If you are showing two sets of data that are completely separate, for example, I might be doing sales and then also total income as finance. Now, these are two visualizations that maybe an executive wants to see at the same time. Using layers would simply add kind of an extra step. I have to click on a button in order to switch between these two views. It might become tedious. It might be much easier to display both of them out at once. So it's really up to your discretion. Once again, as I mentioned, in my case, simply because I positioned these two visualizations on top of one another, that's why the layers came into play, but I could still very easily show them side by side or something like that. So I hope that answers it. Please let me know if that was good. And we have a question from someone I am familiar with about supporting MySQL. Definitely that is one of our data sources over here. So MySQL is on the list. Another question we have is, can the data be exported to a CSV file? Absolutely, it can. So if you click on share, it's not one of the options here, but simply click on any one of them, and then from the drop down you can select CSV. Once again, you have the same options as before. Do you want to export the chart, the table? That's up to you, and I could set these up to be sent out as notifications very easily. And a summary for everyone, because I do see the question. Yes, a recording of this presentation will be available online very shortly. So here we have an interesting question. about using stored procedures, it reads, is it possible to call a stored procedure daily, fetch results, and send it to users on a daily basis as a report? Absolutely. So let me go ahead and I'll open up that data cube that we created. Let's do this one. So first of all, on the right side of my screen, you can see I've opened up another data connector that in this particular case we are picking up on the views and the different stored procedures here. So this is very easy to use. You just basically drag it out like that onto the designer, and so now you have access to this. So what you would do is you would bring in your stored procedure, set up any parameters that are necessary, and then you can set the storage type. So for example, I can choose warehouse or in-memory, that doesn't matter. When I click on one of these, I can now check in my work. So Dundas BI does have the concept of revision control. I can type in some comments. If I'm a prudent programmer, I will definitely add some comments, and then I'll ask if you want to process the data. So I'll just click no for now. But once the data cube is checked in, I can set up a schedule. So I can say, I can go in here and, for example, say that every night at midnight, let's pull in new information and rebuild this data model. The next step is simply to create a dashboard or report using this data model. So the very same way, if I go up to my, back to my layers dashboard and I edit it, on the right side of my screen, you will see my data cubes are visible to me. So it's the exact same experience I can show you with Excel. I see all my measures, all my dimensions, same with the data cube. This is how you build out the model. And then you would simply go ahead and set up the scheduled notification. Probably set it to run a few minutes after the data cube is set to build. Give it some time to process all the information, and then automatically send these out to the different users. So that's the flow you would take to accomplish something like that. Once again, it's all very flexible. So the type of dashboard or report that you create is entirely up to you. The data model that you pull in, that's up to you. How frequently you update and send it out, all configurable. Another question about the storage type. So is the storage type warehouse a subscription service or part of the software? Everything that I've shown to you is all part of the software. So when we work with clients, we give to you the software. We don't host for our clients. Instead, we give you that ability to choose if you want to deploy it on-prem, if you want to put it up in the cloud offering of your choice, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, some other hosting such as Rackspace. That is entirely up to you. So you do have that flexibility as well. The warehouse is in fact a Microsoft SQL Server database. So it's up to you to point the application to this database. It can essentially live wherever you want it to live. Ideally, it's somewhere kind of close to the server Dundas BI is on for performance reasons. And you can warehouse as much data to your heart's content. And same with the in-memory. You can add as much data into memory. Of course, the limitation there will be at some point the hardware comes into play. If you find that you need more memory, simply add some more memory to the server, or move some things around, juggle them in the data cube layer, switch over to a warehouse or real time. You can make that change at any moment. And now we have another very interesting question. First of all, thanking me for the demo. Thanks for the question as well and for listening. Can I develop my own user interface to create a dashboard using third-party charting libraries? Absolutely, that is doable. So as I mentioned, we have fully open APIs on the back end, on the front end. If you want to import, let's say, a very custom visualization and integrate it into the application, you are able to do that using our .NET API. So all of these visualizations that you see here, everything is in fact a plugin. If you want to modify some of these, or add your own. Once again, that will occur using the APIs. However, out on a dashboard, and this is very nice, you can simply go ahead and type in some JavaScript. So I can very quickly show you, we have different events. These will seem very familiar to web developers out there, and the visualization itself also has a lot more events to really customize it. So I can make it so that when I click on the dashboard, or rather on the visualization, I can add a script and type in my JavaScript. So we do have some examples on our support site. You can simply head over to dundas.com, and in fact I can show you that very quickly. So dundas.com. We have our support website with a list of our developer resources. And by all means, go ahead, take a look at our APIs. We also have a script library, and we're constantly working on improving this. In fact, the very first option over here is inserting third-party web content right into the application. Now, what we're looking at, this is an example of an embedded dashboard. Although we're in our Dundas BI website, this is integrated, and we are seeing a Venn diagram. This Venn diagram does leverage the D3 library. So if you're familiar with that, or you're interested, by all means, you can basically take some of those visualizations. In this case, essentially copy-paste the JavaScript right out onto a dashboard and make use of that. Another question about creating multi-tab Excel reports. Yes, in fact, by default, when I click on share, and if I export the entire view or even multiple visualizations, it puts each one of those onto its own tab. So it's not going to place everything onto one tab. It's a lot easier to work with it when it's separate. You also have some options down here. You can, for instance, include an image of the item, also include in the Excel export any parameter values, filters that were applied to the data, and so on. So we are approaching the top of the hour. I know there's still some very interesting questions, things about scripting and other logical models and applying security. So I just don't think we have enough time to answer all of those, but any questions that are not answered right now, we will go ahead and reply to you personally. But if something else is outstanding, as I mentioned before, by all means, you can go ahead and get in touch with us, get in touch with our support team or an account executive to discuss any next steps. Okay, so with that out of the next slide. There we go. For everyone that stayed up to this point and those that have left as well, thank you very much for joining the webinar. It was a pleasure presenting our new features to you. Once again, as I mentioned, we do have a webinar coming up around the end of April with all new version 4 features, so feel free to join those as well, and we will be replying to any questions that are left. Thanks again. I hope everyone has a great day.